Thank you for joining us at the New Mexico Film Office Spotlight. Today we have a special guest of Marchello De Francisci. He is a film composer who is recently moved to New Mexico and bringing his talents. And we're chatting with him about his experience, his process, and why he's choosing New Mexico as a home.
I'm a film composer. I've been working out of LA for many years, and about a year ago, I relocated to New Mexico and started my efforts to create something out here. And I've been working with artists abroad and working on films. Been doing this for a long time, and I've got all credits. I've worked on feature films, video games, movie trailers, documentaries. I compose everything from the ground up, produce, mix, master. Basically, one-stop shop. I hate the word shop, but I collaborate with also recording artists throughout the planet, the globe. So that's basically what I do.
Very cool. So, Marcello, what motivated you to want to get into music composing and then going into film?
Well, I started out as a fine artist. I was living in Spain at the time, so I studied in a school that taught a very ancient technique taught by a very famous Spanish painter called Murillo, and so I used to listen to a lot of music when I was painting. I was living on the Mediterranean at the time, and one day I decided I'd like to write music. I'd like to compose music that I would listen to while I'm painting. And it just seemed to flow. Things just, when I started doing that, I mean, I ended up doing an album. And then having an American passport, I decided to come to the US and landed in Hollywood and got to work with some of the top film composers in the world. So.
Wow, that's so lovely. So, for those who may not understand, would you mind explaining what a film composer does?
Sure. I mean, usually towards the end of the film, when a film's already been edited and it's getting ready to be locked, as they call it, lock picture, a composer will come in and he'll start writing music to scenes. He works very closely with the director and the editor. And so many times editors, what they do is they start using what they call temp score to kind of get a vibe and an idea of how the music's going to fit the picture emotionally. And so many times you get a film that has a lot of temp score and you have to kind of create your own thing, bring your own vision to it, and work very closely with the director to make sure that the music is hitting all the emotional points that he wants throughout the entire film. Because the music's basically kind of an emotional bridge between the viewer and the actual picture. Sometimes there's a certain emotion that the director wants to portray in a scene, and music just seems to be that gateway that allows the viewer to feel what the character's feeling in the film. So that's what basically the job of a film composer is.
So, instrument wise, are you well versed in many different types of instruments of how you put this together? How does that process work?
Yeah, well, I play a lot of stringed instruments, like from Middle Eastern instruments, oud. I play the saz. Having lived in Spain, I learned how to play some Spanish guitar, and then I play obviously electric guitar, bass, all those things. I play some percussion, and then I bring in musicians, which is one of the reasons I'm very excited about being in New Mexico, because I think there's a lot of untapped talent here, especially in the Native American cultures, that I'd like to incorporate into my soundtrack scores. So that's something I'm excited about developing and discovering out here. So
Very cool. So, what are some of the most recent projects? You've been doing this for quite some time. So, what projects can we really look out for your music? What do you have coming up?
sure.
What does your filmography really look like?
Well, I mean, I've been working on a lot of film. I've been I've worked on a lot of films. My most recent project, I just got back from Los Angeles. I was working 6 weeks on a film called Ferrari for Michael Mann, director Michael Mann, who directed Last of the Mohicans. He directed Heat. He directed The Insider, Ali. He's a very prominent director. So I was invited to set up my studio in his offices in west Los Angeles, and I wrote some music for that film. There's a few composers that are involved. He likes to work with multiple composers. Um, and so I was set up there, and I was going back and forth from there to Fox Studios to meet with him and get notes from him. Um, so that's the latest project that I just recently wrapped up, and I've got a film coming up that I'm going to do here in New Mexico very soon. The next couple of weeks, I'm starting out. So I'm in the process of fully setting up my studio here in Albuquerque. So.
Very cool. Very cool. And what have been one of, besides your most recent Ferrari project, what's been some of the favorite projects that you've worked on in the past?
I worked on a Western called Jane Got a Gun, starring Natalie Portman and Ian McGregor. I did the music for that. There was a very famous documentary called Samsara that I did a few years back that was very well known. It was very well received globally. I've done a lot of music for trailers, like they've used my music for Avengers Endgame, big blockbuster films like National Treasure, Hellboy. They've used my music on a lot of those trailers. I've done a lot of music for trailers as well. I wrote some music for Nebraska for Alexander Payne's film. It's kind of interesting when people ask me what I've done. You're always thinking about what you're going to do. Then I go back and I go, oh my God, I forgot to mention that I worked on this or that. So.
No, that's great. You have a great library. So, in film composition, what does that really look like? Like, what is the process? How long does it take for you to really put the pieces together after, this is after post production? What does that process look like for you?
Well, I mean, it all depends on what they're using, what temp score they're using. If it's orchestral and it's very elaborate, then obviously that takes more time in the event. Like, let's say you're writing music for like a film like Lord of the Rings, There's sometimes scores where directors want something very minimalistic, so less is more. So it all depends. But I mean, basically what I do is I sit in the room. I have, my images of the film, the movie, and I have a software that allows me to sync the movie to music. So I start writing and it's a really tedious process because you start to discover what works to picture. It's really interesting. You can put a lot of things up against the scene and you can tell instantly what doesn't work. So sometimes it takes longer to find what works, in the process of elimination of saying, okay, I've tried this, I've tried that, that doesn't work. And many times, what I've discovered, and I realize that other composers have this experience, is that sometimes you're convinced that what you're going to do is great. And you've got this scene and you're very happy with it and you think it's great until the director walks in. And it isn't until the director's sitting next to you that you're playing that scene back that you realize at that moment the music you wrote for that scene is completely wrong. So it's a process of elimination more than anything else,
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I love the whole process of creating music that works to scenes and creating kind of a musical landscape that takes the viewer into the story from an emotional standpoint. That's the process that I really love about doing this.
That's beautiful because I don't think really people pay much attention. It's part of the storytelling, but not really thinking about how much music plays into the story and how much it really emphasizes and tells the story along with the acting and the location and the scenery and all the components that really go into telling the story of a film.
Well, I think if that's the experience you've had, then the composer's done what he should do. I don't think a score should be something that should be noticed unless there is a musical scene in a film. There are scenes that are musical. I lean more towards that genre of scoring where you don't really notice the score, but then when you walk away and you hear the music by itself, you start seeing images of the film. A lot of times I argue with directors because I want them to lore my music. I don't, I had when I was working on this movie Ferrari recently, I kept telling the editor and the music supervisor to lore my music, and I kept telling them that I feel when you score a film, the music should be kind of like a mist over the dialogue, where it's something that you notice, but it's not something that's overwhelming. And I'm seeing more and more how films, the music is becoming so overwhelming that it almost turns into a music video at times. I don't particularly think that's great for a film unless there is a specific piece of music that needs to be showcased that way on a film. That's just my philosophy.
No, that makes sense. But you kind of touched on it earlier as well, of also kind of hitting that subconscious, because then when you listen to the music away from the imagery, it can kind of take you back to that moment in the film.
Exactly. And I discovered that because I used to listen to a lot of soundtrack scores before I started writing music. I picked up instruments when I was a kid, alongside my artistic, my visual artistic tendencies. But I remember listening to scores by composers in the 70s and 80s that they were great storytellers. It's the one thing that I love about doing what I do is I try to tell a story, and it's about storytelling, so that you could listen to a soundtrack score and it takes you back into that story. I mean, I'm a firm believer of that, even though I don't see it a lot these days. But that's something that I like to pursue as a creative in this field.
That's beautiful. So, what made you want to bring your talents to New Mexico?
Well, it's interesting. I was invited to come speak at the Four Corners Film Festival in 2021, and I saw the terrain and the up and just the landscape in general of all the potential that this state has to offer from a creative and inspirational standpoint. Visually, it's stunning. I find New Mexico to be stunning, um, and I thought that maybe I could make a much greater impact in a community like New Mexico than I could in LA, because in Los Angeles, everybody's so overwhelmed. So from a creative standpoint, I think I would have a lot more open space here to try things out, because there's more room to grow, as opposed to in Hollywood, where people have a very specific mindset. So my intention to coming out here, from a very humble standpoint, I'm not coming here with any kind of big idea that I'm going to rock the scene or anything, but I want to create something that's unique here, at least on my own, and start from there. Like, I work with artists internationally. For example, I work a lot with a very well-known singer called Lisa Gerard. She co-wrote the soundtrack score to Gladiator with Hans Zimmer, and we've been working a lot in the last few years. I just released an album with her last year called Exaudia, and it's an album that's had a lot of activity online. And so I have artists that I'm working with internationally, and so I've got work cut out for me here. But if I can somehow involve the community here and start a really interesting creative circle of people that I resonate with, and we can start creating something that's very signature to the Albuquerque area, especially now with Netflix coming in and Universal and everything that's happening in Las Cruces. I think that I'm not looking to do this alone. I mean, I'm looking to invite artists and to create a community where we can all create something that could become a very signature sound to this part of the country. You have Atlanta now, where there's a lot of composers that are based there and they're doing their thing. I know most everybody in LA, and I know what they're doing. But I think there's room here to create something that's very unique to New Mexico, and I think it's time. And I think that there's talent here that could support that vision that I have, and I look forward to inviting them to be part of the process.
That's beautiful. As we build up our film ecosystem, we're really excited to have you a part of that. And
Thank you.
again, kind of transplanting yourself here and with your past experience, it's really exciting to see someone with your talent and caliber to come out here and really create something that's unique, something that's specific to us, and just contribute to the hub that we have out here.
Thank you. Well, my intentions when I've spoken to people, it's I was invited originally to come out here and kind of be jumping back and forth from LA to New Mexico, but I want to make a commitment to this community and try it out for a couple of years and see what happens. I feel at home here actually. It reminds me very much of the Mediterranean, the sky, the light here, the mountains of where I used to live in the Mediterranean. Obviously, we don't have the ocean, but we have the sea, but we do have the rivers and the mountains. And so, from a creative standpoint, I feel a lot more inspired here than I do in Los Angeles. I mean, I just got back, and it's very difficult for an artist to feel the inner peace and to be able to be creative in an environment where you're hearing helicopters all the time flying and ambulances. Whereas here you can find a spot where you feel comfortable in and just focus on the creative and serve your clients in a much more paced way without all that anxiety that's so consequential. I mean, so indicative of living in a big city. So I find that very intriguing to see what will happen in the coming months.
No, that's beautiful. One thing about New Mexico is it's very grounding.
Yeah,
And I love that it also gives you a sense of home, being from the Mediterranean and bringing that sense of peace to you. So that's wonderful to hear.
yeah. No, and and just from the day to day, as an artist, you go out, you might go to the market, or the day to day here is people are really. I mean, I've encountered people to be very nice. I mean, in Los Angeles, I discovered after not having been there for a year and living here how difficult it is for creative people. Truly, I mean, people go there because it's a work hub, but it's a very challenging dynamic that I think Albuquerque and New Mexico in general are in a complete opposite pole to that. And from a creative standpoint, I think it's going to be a great source of inspiration. So I'm looking forward to working here.
That's great. Well, we're very excited to have you. So, for somebody who's interested in getting into composing and film, how would you recommend that they get started, get into the industry, tricks of the trade, some words of wisdom?
Well, I mean, I'll, if I was able to do it, I think it's not impossible because I've spent many years trying to break into this industry. The one thing that I would advise anyone who wants to do soundtrack scoring is, first of all, listen to what's coming out, listen to soundtracks, and find a style that you really like and specialize in that style. And once you master that, learn other styles of music, because soundtrack scores, unlike any other type of music, really pushes you to learn every style of music there's out there, because every film is going to demand that you reinvent yourself. So that's important to know music. In other words, to listen to every film composer and understand what they're doing and what's working and what's not. Grab scenes from films and score to them. Try to find independent filmmakers and work with them. If you're a young kid and you're in your teens or you're in your early 20s and you want to score films, meet other like-minded creatives and start working with them closely, because if they grow, you will grow with them. That's something that happens in this field. And at the same time, another aspect of what I do, which I take very seriously, is the whole what's labeled production in my field, which is the whole process of what it takes to make something sound good. Learn what they call production. Learn how to mix. Learn how to EQ. Learn about all the tools that are available to make music sound great. Because if you develop your own sound that's very signature, then clients will come to you specifically for the sound that you're developing for them. And I've seen that with a lot of artists. I've seen, for example, there's composers in Hollywood that are known for a specific genre, and they get hired for that specific genre, and they've become very, very successful at it. And it's a way to break in because you have a specialty that you only do. And so that'll create a signature work that you do, and people will come to you for it. So it's a process of both, of writing music, but also creating your own sound, your own tone, and really homing in on that. That's a very important aspect of what we do, and I pursue that very, very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a way, it's experimenting to find what you're really passionate about with sound and then fine tuning that.
Exactly. Well, it's I attribute it to cooking. For example, and I've mentioned this many times in interviews. A show that really inspired me, which has nothing to do with music, was a show on Netflix called Chef's Table. And the reason I love that show is because it gives you this insight into many well-known chefs throughout the world. And the one thing that I noticed, for example, some of these chefs will have a little farm next to the restaurant. Like there's a guy in Melbourne who's a very well-known chef, and he's got a farm, like a little garden next to his restaurant. Well, he'll go and he'll pick and he'll grow his own things. So he creates these dishes that are so signature that people travel all over the world to go to his restaurant. And I believe music is something that we experience physically, just like food. I mean, just like air, just like an aroma. And so you can really work with the tools that we have today, with software and hardware, to create a sonic experience. It's more than just music. It's about creating an experience. I've had directors walk into my studio because, today with the advent of telephones and headphones and all that, people listen to stuff on their earpods, and they walk into my studio and they'll listen to a piece of music that I've written for their film, and they get immersed in this, not just music, but this environment that I'm creating musically, sonically. And I can see the reaction they have to it. So I pursue that with a lot of passion. It's not just about the music, it's the way it's presented. Like everything else, you can present something in such a way that's so unique and so signature that people will come to you specifically because that's what you do. And so I think in order to create a successful career in this field, that's a very important aspect of what we do.
No, absolutely. I can definitely see that. Well, so how can people get more familiar with you? Are you active on social media? Do you have a website? How can people really learn more about you, get in contact with you, and what you have coming up?
Well, I've got a website. It's my name, marcellodefrancisci.com. And I also have a YouTube channel, which is Marcello De Francisci #1. I think Yahoo, the whole link, that's basically the channel name, Marcello De Francisci 1. And so on YouTube, I'm pretty active. On Facebook, I'm not that active actually. I mean, it's challenging for me to be writing music and then get into this whole mode of, I know I have to do the whole social media thing, but it's challenging when you're in the studio and you're in this very creative mode, and now I have to go out there and just, So I let my agent and when we release an album, then the PR people really handle a lot of that, pushing all that stuff on social media.
Well, great. Well, we'll definitely link people to your website and to your YouTube so that way they can see what you're up to. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the film office and the New Mexico community?
No, I just want to thank everyone. Everyone's been very accommodating. I think it's an amazing time for New Mexico, and I'm happy to be part of the community, and I look forward to serving a lot of the creatives here in the state. So I'm excited.
Well, we're very excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and having this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you and everything that you do, and we're really excited to have you here in New Mexico. Thank you.